you can zoom in and go, I can even do a dimension there.
That's really good. But not all small.
No, it's like so fair. It's like minuscule.
Good evening, everybody. We might make a start now. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which we gathered here this evening, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. Moving on to item 1, membership. Membership is as listed in the agenda. Item 2, apologies received from Councillor Lawrence, who is on an approved leave of absence. Item 3, disclosures of conflicts of interest. Are there any disclosures, councillors?
No.
You can't hear us? We'll just see what we can do about that. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Great, thank you. Moving on to item 4, confirmation of the minutes of Planning Committee meeting from the meeting held on the 10th of July 2017. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Greco and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Williams. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Item 5, consideration of reports. 5.1, application for a planning permit at 15 Herbert Street, Northcote. Officers.
Thank you, councillors. This is an application to demolish an existing building on the site and to construct a new single double-storey dwelling on the same site. The site is covered by a heritage overlay and therefore a planning permit is required to demolish the dwelling and to construct a new dwelling on the site. It is relevant to note that the assessment criteria that we utilise when assessing a heritage application on larger sites, and when I refer to larger sites, I'm referring to sites of over 300 square metres in area, is that the siting requirements, the setbacks, overshadowing, overlooking, those don't come into consideration when we consider an application like this, because the site is over 300 square metres in area. So this application has been advertised in the normal fashion, and as a result of that formal notification process, 9 objections have been received from the community, and the grounds of objection are summarised at page 4 of the agenda. Now, some of those grounds of objection relate to matters that we can't consider, but the community has decided that these are grounds that they wish to put to council. Now, this application has been referred to our Heritage Advisor for assessment, and it has been found that the application is suitable for support. The proposal is clearly a contemporary building, but our heritage overlay doesn't prohibit a contemporary building from being constructed on the site. The form of the building as it presents to Herbert Street is residential in form. The material choice is a combination of brick but mainly metal clad, and it's a dark grey metal cladding. Councillors, in our opinion, the proposal is suitable and worthy of support, and we've imposed conditions. That is a notice of decision with conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of the applicant, I have William Stewart and David Fisher registered to speak. Would you like to come forward? Would you just like to take a seat at this table here? Thank you. You'll have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Is this on? Yes.
Yep.
Hello. William Stewart's my name. I'm a registered master builder of some 40 years of experience. I just want to highlight I'm not a developer. This is a family home. My grandchildren and children live in the local area, go to the local school, and we want to live in the local area. We also want to be grandparents, pick our kids up from school, and be part of the community. I think we have a lot to offer to the community, to participate in the community, and I just want to reiterate, we are not developers, okay? This is a family home, and that's what we want to build, and we want to be part of the community. Also, my father, who is 89 years of age, is going to move in with us, so he doesn't have to be in a home. The house we've got now is too small to have him be in the house. This house will be big enough. But yeah, that's all I've got to say. But just to reiterate again, I'm not a developer. This is a family home.
Thank you. Do you have anything further to add?
G'day. Yeah, I'd just like to say on the grounds for the development, I'd like to speak on the fact that the plans that we put forward for the heritage application will be the plans that we forward to the building surveyor. There won't be any further modifications to try and squeeze anything in. The house was designed with all regulations considered throughout the whole design process with Bill. So we can say that the house does conform to the regulations as it stands, or the development as it stands currently. So I'd just like to hopefully put people's minds at ease for that.
Thank you very much. You can take your seat back in the gallery.
Excuse me.
Yes?
I'm sorry, we are here on behalf of a gentleman who's sick, and I don't know whether he managed to register to speak or not.
As an objector?
Yes. As an
I
objector.
don't have any objectors registered to speak, Mr. Wright.
We've also been asked by another resident to say a word on their behalf, so I'm sorry if there's no one registered to speak, but is it possible to say a couple of minutes?
If you could,
very quick.
Yeah, if you could state your name and also state who you're, the objector that you're representing.
Sure. Okay, so
if you'd like to come forward and sit down.
My name's Michael Camilleri, and we are living in number 17 Herbert Street, which is next door to the proposal, and we're representing David Connolly, who is the owner of that house. Mm-hmm. We're also representing, or here to just on behalf of Anne McCraig, who is the owner of number 19 Herbert Street.
Mm-hmm.
And we just wanted to say a couple of things. We recognise that the house that's there is an old house and needs to be demolished, and we've got no objection to it being demolished whatsoever. Our main objections, which were, I think, in writing, were that the size of the building takes up pretty much the entire block, which is going to have effects on our house and on number 19 and number 13, but we can't speak on behalf of them. But it's going to block the view of the city from the houses that are next to it, and it's mostly just as far as the character of the street goes, it's a very big building on that block. So that was our main objection, the size of it, that there doesn't seem to be any setback, and the building goes right up to the border of the land, the footprint of the building. The other two things were that there is a third level at the back, so though the house represents as a double-storey house from the front, if you have a look at the plans, the idea is that the house is actually going to go horizontally back towards the back of the block, and the ground slopes down. So effectively, at the back, we're talking about a house that's 3 stories high. So it's just too high. And the third thing was was a minor thing, I guess, was about the metal cladding and the dark metal cladding, whether or not that was actually appropriate. But it was mainly the size. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can return to your seat in the gallery. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor McCarthy.
If we could just have a response from the officers in response to the issues raised by the objectors.
Councillors, with regard to how much of the site is covered by building, that is not a planning requirement, but a building surveyor would assess that control and ensure that it complies with the standard requirement. With regard to setbacks, again, it's not a planning control, but I envisage that the designer will have designed this taking into account the siting requirements of the building regs. Otherwise, they'd have to make amendments and then come back to us through a planning process again. In our view, the other point that was raised was the obstructing views. There's no planning control to protect those views in the first instance, so we can't do much about that either. It may be a little bit deceiving because when you look at the floor plate of the ground level, there's a significant area of decking. That's still considered an open area, but it is possible that the neighbour may have read that as roofed area. It isn't roofed area, it is decking area, and it therefore forms part of the open space of the site. So when you look at the floor plate, the ground floor plate in particular, we have a front setback, front garden, we have a rear garden. But yes, the development does extend a fair amount into the site, it does. In terms of its scale, it is a two-storey building with a terrace. The terrace is designed to be read, in particular when looking at the side elevations, it reads as part of the two-storey element, but there is a level there being the terrace. So when referring to the side elevations, the north and south, and because the development is split level, it reads more as a large two-storey building than a three-storey building. Particularly to the street, clearly reads as a two-storey building. There is a two-storey building to one side that is existing. It has a flat roof component to the street and then a roof element to the rear. But when looking at the proposed streetscape, it sits comfortably at two-storey form in a street next to two-storey buildings and single-storey buildings is an acceptable scale of development. I think I've answered.
There was just an issue about the cladding material.
Oh, the cladding. The designer in this instance, I believe, met with our heritage advisor very early in the piece. Materials was discussed. In terms of a metal clad finish, I have to say that is a very durable product. It's an expensive product, so in our book it's considered high quality material as well because of its durability in particular. What the architect in this instance put to us was the metal cladding is meant to reflect the iron roofs of the older homes, and the component of brickwork to the front is meant to then also represent that brick cladding is found in the area as well. This is clearly not a case of mimicking a old heritage building. It is clearly a contemporary quality building, and our heritage advisor has given it the tick. It's acceptable from that point of view.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Would someone like to move a motion?
I'll move the motion.
The recommendation?
Yes, I'll move the council officer's recommendation to give notice to grant the planning permit.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak to the motion?
Ordinarily, we wouldn't be asked to determine a planning permit for the replacement of one dwelling with another dwelling on a suburban block, and I think that's important to note. That in this instance is different because of the heritage overlay that applies to the area, but we have heard advice that the Heritage Advisor has said that this outcome is satisfactory, and indeed if you look at the appearance of this building from the street and compare it with their building next door, they are actually somewhat similar. So whilst I recognise that it's difficult for people who live in streets that are often largely intact and are quiet and residential and have many lovely buildings to see their streets change, it is the nature of urban development and growth and in fact change that sometimes houses are demolished and they are replaced with other houses, and we have heard that this is a home for people to move into, and I believe it's a high quality home. So on that basis and with the report that I have in front of me, I feel as though we have little choice but to actually approve this. I think that to do anything else would actually be very difficult in light of the planning scheme and the report that we have.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Newton? I'd
echo Councillor Rennie's comments. I think I liked that in the report it said this avoids mimicry while still managing to fit into the street, and I think it's quite an interesting design, and yeah, I understand the concerns of the neighbours, but I think this one's okay.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion's carried. The Planning Committee has decided to grant the planning permit. The decision can be appealed to VCAT. Objectors have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT. The applicant has 60 days. Notice detailing the decision tonight and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant in the next week. Moving now to item 5.2, application for a planning permit at 71 to 73 Station Street, Fairfield. Officer.
Thank you, councillors. This is an application for a 4-storey building plus basement with 17 dwellings, 4 single-bedroom dwellings, 9 2-bedroom dwellings and 4 3-bedroom dwellings. 18 car parking spaces are provided in a basement. A waiver of 6 spaces is sought, which includes 3 visitor spaces. The development is a contemporary building with modulated box-like forms presenting to the street with finished angled vertical cladding with exposed concrete and glass balustrading. The overall building height of the development is 12.6 metres. I might also mention that the site has some planning history. An application has already been determined for a 4-storey building plus basement comprising 27 dwellings, and that was refused on the 18th of June 2016. The applicant subsequently lodged this application, which we're now considering. The proposal has been advertised in the normal fashion, and as a result of that notification, it attracted 3 objections. The objections are summarised at page 17 of your agenda, councillors. Some general comments about the planning controls. This area is earmarked for development of some size. So directly across the road at 62 to 64 Station Street, there is a completed 4-storey residential development. Alongside to the north at 66 is a 4-storey development currently under construction. At 28 to 30 Station Street to the south, there is a 4-storey development nearing completion. So as a council, we've earmarked this area for further development, given its proximity to the Fairfield shops, good public transport, and it's now happening. So these developments are either completed or under construction. In relation to the development itself, the dwellings are either designed to orient Station Street or to the east, and the benefit of that arrangement is that it allows the neighbours to also develop their sites. You end up with construction to boundary or have windows facing east and west, and then allowing development to be built alongside or nearby. The other benefits of that type of construction is that it allows the building, particularly the dwellings within this development, to be flooded with light, daylight in particular. So for the majority of habitable rooms, you will either have a front to Station Street or to the east, the rear yard of this development. The car park is hidden. It's in a basement with a double width crossover connecting to Station Street. The development is clearly contemporary in nature. As I mentioned earlier, box-like forms of glass, steel and concrete will be the external fabric of the development. There is a pedestrian link along the northern edge of the site that leads to a lobby area, lift access to all the dwellings, and that extends to the basement level as well. It is proposed to provide 10 car parking space, 10 bicycle spaces as well, which exceeds the planning scheme requirements. Councillors, we recommend that the project should be supported with conditions. We have requested additional screening to particular elevations. We've also noted that some of the balcony dimensions are 1.5, they should be 1.6, so we've conditioned that some of the balconies should be increased in size. And further to that, we've requested a palette of external materials. Even though the applicant has described to us what they propose in terms of an external material, it's often really important with these larger developments to have them think about that carefully, create a material board and submit that as part of any condition plans that are submitted to us for approval. So, councillors, we are recommending approval with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the applicant, I have Lorenzo Rigoni registered to speak. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, council officers, my name's Lorenzo Rigoni. I'm a planning consultant from Terrain Consulting Group. We're planners and land surveyors. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking this evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the permit applicant. As the council officers had indicated that there is some planning permit history. The previous proposal was for 27 apartments, which was refused by council for various reasons from design matters. Now, we had two choices, go to VCAT and contest it, but instead we workshopped with the client, and the client formed the view to go literally back to the drawing board, engage a new architect, and the result is what's before you, which is 17 apartments. Before we lodged, we had 3, perhaps 4 pre-application meetings with council officers, so we worked closely with the officers. They gave feedback with relation to the apartment garden type of model, which is advocated in the zone itself. And then ultimately it got to a stage where we were encouraged to lodge the application because officers were happy with the proposal. The site's got a lot going for it strategically. If you know the intersection, it abuts a commercial zone, it's walking distance to the railway station, you've got apartment developments opposite being developed, and hence the zoning of the land being a residential growth zone number 3, which amongst other matters encourages apartments and 4 stories. There's a little typo in the officer's report on page 1. It actually refers to a general residential zone, but nothing turns to that because we clearly are in a residential growth zone and we satisfy the intent in that regard. The site's got 19 car spaces on the property. The report says 18, so it's perhaps a little bit of a slip there as well. So but we have no issues with any of the conditions on the planning permit. I think one of the conditions requires each dwelling to have a car space. Of course, we're more than happy with that requirement. So it's been a substantial change area. You've got development occurring. The officers indicated it is occurring, it will continue to occur, and it's in line with council's strategic vision. Various council officers have looked at the proposal and supportive of the proposal. Importantly, VicRoads is also supportive of the proposal. being Station Street being a Category 1 road zone. Last Friday, Gabrielle from our office, you may have come across councillors, we sent an email with a whole series of 3Ds. And speaking to the officers the week before, there was a queries about internal amenities. So hopefully those 3Ds give a real cue in terms of the quality of the design by the architect and the applicant, the internal daylight that's envisaged in terms of this proposal, and also the contemporary nature and the manner in which the materials and finishes would be completed in this presentation to the streetscape. So we're very comfortable. We think it's a high quality outcome in terms of the site. Just in terms of addressing interface, the flats to the south we've been particularly mindful, and the landscape plan you probably can't see, but we've got a belt of screen planting along the south boundary, and they are a combination of capital pears and also pin oaks, and they grow in an ideal situation in excess of 10 metres in height. So we're trying to give that interface consideration to the flats as well. I won't go through the office report because it's well addressed, but respectfully request that a planning permit be issued. And importantly, we've got no issues with the officer's recommendation and any of the conditions. And in this case, we're quite comfortable that we've addressed the fundamental design issues that came through in the previous planning application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have any questions if there's no questions. No, okay.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
There is no one, no objectors registered to speak. So, councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Amir.
I have a question. It may or may not be one where an answer is available, but one of my concerns is particularly around the units at 69 Station Street, particularly the one of that block, the northwest corner. So it looks like from the shadow diagrams that for the habitable window and balcony in that location, that there's be no light available almost all the day for what looks like 9 months of the year. So I just had a question about if we know whether that particular apartment has, if that is the sole point of access to light, or whether perhaps one of the other windows and balconies might be to the same apartment. Does that make sense?
Councillor, I'm not aware of the internal layout of that
fine.
development, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
If I might for you, Mayor Lasserf, I'm interested in the bedroom windows on the south side of the development, and note there's some provisions for screening. What does that mean for those windows on the south side of this development? Are they going to effectively be windows that are screened and don't allow view?
And the renders that the applicant was referring to demonstrate that better than the drawings that you all have before you. But the idea is that there's windows and there's an external cladding system, being a cement sheet product, that's on a fixed angle. And I think that was included in this documentation. So the idea is it allows views out, but not directly into the balcony space or the windows of the property to the south. So I'll just turn to particular plan, and it is the facade screen detail. So I'm not sure whether you're able to see this, but the louvers which are fixed will prevent that direct outlook into the neighbours' windows and balconies, but it still allow you to peer out into the distance, and that's the important thing. You don't want to peer out into a fence or into someone's window, but you want to still be able to peer out into a distance, but not interfere with anyone's amenity. And that's clever design, and that's what we want our designers to do when it comes to screening, to prevent unreasonable overlooking. Utilise these methods. So the first is placement of window. Second would be, well, if you're going to use a screening device, also protect the amenity of the future occupant whilst protecting the amenity of the neighbour.
Can I just check that I understand? Sorry, it's a follow-on. What does that mean for someone who's in that bedroom and standing 2 or 3 metres back from the window in terms of what they see when they look at the window?
When they're standing back 2 or 3 metres, they will see the louver sections. If angled as shown here, it will read as a wall of louvers. When you come closer to that window, you'll be able to peer out into the distance though. So what it does is it allows you to have a large glazed area, but then you'll have this treatment on the outside. And the designers have been particular in terms of their cladding. They want it to be read in the round basically, so not have sections of cladding and that type of treatment, but that type of treatment reads all the way around the building. It's a simplified look, but it's a smart look at the same time.
Thank you.
Councillor Greco, did you have a question?
Look, I had a question that went to the design and materials that are used. And I just wanted to ask, if we can unpack a little bit more about the design and the material and whether it's consistent with the site and the surrounds, and if you can sort of unpack a little bit more about that particular area, given that it's very much a village type setting.
Yeah. It is what the applicants are proposing is clearly a contemporary material. It is a concrete finish, and we sought more information from the applicant about the type of material. It is once called an equitone facade panel, which basically means the treatment, the colour is inbuilt into the product all the way through. It's not like a cement sheet where you just paint the outside of it. It is actually built all the way through the product. It is a durable structural product. I might just pass these around. This is what I got from the net. But basically it's that product and that product. So it will read like a concrete finish, but isn't a concrete tilt panel. It is a slenderer product, but still a very structural and durable product. And again, even with this one, we've imposed a condition requiring that they stipulate that detail prior to any approval of any plans, because it's so important to get the material right for a large-scale development of this type.
Do you have a further question? Yes.
Thanks for the explanation about the material, but I suppose also my question went to how that fits into that particular site and surrounds.
Well, most of the contemporary buildings that are built, the ones directly opposite, are clearly contemporary. They either have concrete tilt panel or rendered cement sheet type products. This fits in perfectly with that. And those developments are directly across the road. The one at 28 to 30 Station Street, again, a very contemporary finish. What you'll find with the larger scale apartments is they don't try to mimic any type of form, traditional residential form that we see in our neighbourhoods. It's clearly contemporary, large scale, and that's what this is as well. And I believe it fits that type of development very well.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Messina?
Clarification about the lighting in apartment G01 and G03 and apartment 101 and 104. In terms of the L-shaped bedroom, is there enough lighting going in there?
Councillor, in this development there are select dwellings that have what lacks type of arrangement. That's not preferred. But for the majority of dwellings have good access to daylight. This development predated the new controls of Clause 58, which relate to the apartment developments, which discourage that type of floor plate. So we've taken into account this came in before that control. So in fairness to the developer and the development community, we apply the control at the time that the application was lodged. But having said that, we did turn our mind to, well, okay, if there are a few like that, the majority achieve good access to daylight because they have those large window arrangements, as I described earlier, and therefore on balance, it's still supportable, and that's what we're proposing here. So yes, we prefer to have fewer of those or have none of those, but in many developments you will have a select number, and it wasn't that long ago where even the tribunal would allow 10%, if not more, of developments like that, provided the majority either complied or exceeded the requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Rennie?
I'll move a motion that we reject the granting of a planning permit in this occasion. I have
Would you like
some wording of the
to read
motion.
out the refusal?
Certainly. The motion is that Council refuse the application with grounds as follows. The internal amenity of selected apartments provides a poor outcome arising from deep living spaces, battle-axe bedrooms and poor access to daylight. 2. No visitor car parking is provided, contrary to clause 5206 car parking of the Darebin Planning Scheme. 3. Non-compliance with standard B6 street setbacks. 4. Non-compliance with standard B17 side setbacks. 5. Non-compliance with standard B18 walls on boundaries. 6. Non-compliance with standard B28 inadequate open space.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. I'm interested that, we hear that this development is supportable. And I think that word supportable is very interesting in what it suggests, because it doesn't suggest that this development is terrific or that this development is exemplary. It suggests that, on a balance, it just makes it over the line. And I don't want to sit here and approve housing that will be in our area for 50 or 100 years or beyond if it just makes it over the line. There are a number of areas of non-compliance, and the fact that some apartments are exemplary, and I do believe there are actually some quality aspects of this, does not make up for other apartments being less than what we would expect. So more in one area does not make up for less in another area, because the person who gets the apartment that isn't quite right, they don't care that someone next door has got an apartment that's terrific. That doesn't make their apartment better, the fact that the person next door has an apartment that is exemplary. Every person who moves into a new house built in Darebin today should move into an apartment that's exemplary, whether they're small or large or whatever. I find the fact that some people have really poor access to daylight, or that daylight is compromised by a battle-axe arrangement or by a screening device that means that when they enter their room they can't see out. In order to see out they have to step close to the window. I find that inadequate, and I think we can do better. So, I recognise the time that it's taken for the applicants to get this development to this stage. I hope that we'll be able to reach a solution which sees every apartment in this development meet that standard that we want to see. I think that is achievable. I don't have an issue with the built form or the height or the number of apartments. I just think it's important that every person benefit from the exemplary apartment that we would like to see people move into.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
I don't have a great deal to add. I think Councillor Rennie has outlined a very cohesive argument when you think about the quality of the decision that we make is decades in its legacy, and so it is important to get it right. It is not impossible to comply with the relevant provisions, but also importantly it's not impossible to deliver the type of internal amenity to apartments that people will be living in. And on that basis, whilst I appreciate the issues and the challenges that the applicant has outlined in getting to this stage, and I also see merit in the external elements of the design, it's the internal elements which I think, for me, have swung me to want to refuse this on this occasion and hope that a better outcome is achieved as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Greco.
If I may, I have an additional amendment, and I'll read it out to see whether it's okay with the mover and the seconder. The additional amendment reads as follows: that the design and materials used are not consistent with the design and development overlay Schedule 20 regarding the preferred built form and character of the site and surrounds.
Councillor Rennie?
I'd have to say that's not my primary concern, but I'm happy to have that added.
Councillor McCarthy?
Probably for the same reasoning. That's not.
Would you like any advice from the officers around?
Yeah, I think it would be valuable to hear that.
Thank you for that. I'll just speak briefly.
Just one moment, Councillor Greco. We're just going to get the opinion of the officers about that addition before they agree. Is that what we're doing?
I'd like to know how the officers interpret that condition, that ground, in light of its merits.
I don't think that would be successful at appeal, because I think it is a suitable and quality product, as I mentioned earlier. It's not your standard blue board, it's not your standard, flimsy material. It is a structural product. As I said, I did some research on the net. I've got other diagrams, other images of where that product's been used on much larger buildings. So I don't think that would stand at VCAT, is the point I'd like to make. So we certainly would lose on that one, in my opinion.
On that basis, I wouldn't accept that point again.
I have, and I'm sorry because I understand we're at the wrong stage in the process for this question, but just a question in relation to compliance with A10, if I could seek some clarification from the officers about their thoughts about compliance with standard A10.
So at the standard
A10.
Councillors, my response to that would be the property to the south is already overshadowed. Council has earmarked these areas for substantial development. You will have those amenity impacts purely as a result of allowing larger development. Having said that, what the applicants have attempted to do, because what they're trying to do is meet the objective of achieving a 4-storey development, because going lower than that could be considered an underdevelopment, so council could refuse an application because it's not at that scale. When referring to the floor plates of the development, so when referring to the ground floor, first floor, second floor and third floor, particularly the third and fourth floor, you end up with significant setbacks from that property to the south in the order of 6 metres. So the applicants have made a conscious effort to move the building away from that sensitive interface, particularly the south and the east, but even by doing so they still end up creating that extra shadow. So we've acknowledged in our report there is extra shadow, but given the context, given the planning policy for this area, and that's what I mentioned earlier as well, it's taking into account context, policy, is the development supportable even though it doesn't comply with particular areas? That's the call a planner makes on a daily basis. And that's why the controls are often not prescriptive. They allow the designer to run an alternate argument and then also taking into account, as I mentioned, the policy stance of council to come up with a product before you. So yes, there is extra shadow, but in the scheme of planning control, what we're wanting to see in these areas, what the designer has attempted to do in terms of pushing the building back from those sensitive interfaces, yes, there's still shadow, but they have moved the building a significant distance from that boundary in the order of 6 metres.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to go back to the question, the amendment put by Councillor Greco, so just to clarify that Councillor McCarthy did not accept to be incorporated. Is that correct?
Well, based on the advice from the officers,
Yes.
I didn't feel that it had merit.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we cleared that off because we moved off that quite quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Councillor Greco, did you want to speak to the motion?
Based on the information that I've heard, I will withdraw that additional position.
Okay, would you like to speak to the motion now or?
No,
No?
it's okay.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? No? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And against? Motion's carried. The Planning Committee has decided to refuse the planning permit. The applicant has 60 days to appeal this decision to VCAT. Notices detailing tonight's decision and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant over the next week. Moving now to item 5.3, application for a planning permit at 74 to 76 Kramer Street, Preston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This application seeks approval to develop 16 three-storey dwellings. All dwellings contain 2 bedrooms. It's also proposed to provide a car space each in a garage for each of the dwellings. There is a waiver of 3 visitor car parking spaces sought. It's important to point out that vehicle access to this site, or both, there are 2 dwellings there currently. They've each got an access off Kramer Street. It's proposed to provide a single point of entry via Jessie Street, which is a side street. So the site's in a general residential zone. It does allow in certain contexts heights of up to 3 metres, or 3 stories, with 11 metres in height. The site contains 2 existing residential lots. Makes it quite a large site of 1,619 square metres. Notice of the application has been provided. There is a single objection that has been received. This is summarised and responded to on page 43 of the officer's report. Included for the assistance of the committee is the officers highlighted, because it's realised we don't get a lot of 3-storey proposals in the general residential zone. So on page 42 there's a list of comparable developments that have been approved recently in the City of Darebin. The application has been assessed against the provisions of the planning scheme, and it does show a high level of compliance, particularly with Clause 55 requirements. In regard to the question of neighbourhood character and is the 3-storey scale appropriate for this site, the officers relied on the site context and proximity to Preston Central, the railway station nearby, Melbourne Polytechnic across the road, which suggests that it's in an area where there might be slightly higher densities contemplated than pristine residential areas. So there is a mix of use. It's slightly outside the Preston Central Structure Plan area. At the end of the street there is also a residential growth zone that allows heights up to 6 storeys. The application is therefore recommended for support with a notice of decision subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of people registered on behalf of the applicant to address the committee. Are you planning on coming down together or individually?
Yeah.
Yep. So I have Tamara Dunkley. I'm going to say these, so apologies if I get your name wrong. Ben Atanasovsky and Joseph Indomenico. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors, council officers. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. This is an application that we've had running with the Planning Department for some time now, and one that we're extremely proud of as a consultancy and as a project team. We've worked incredibly hard with the officers in the Planning Department, Traffic Department, ASD and others to get to this point, and we're truly grateful for the assistance and advice that we've received to date in getting to this point. Rather than provide an in-depth overview of the application, I think it's only necessary to touch on a couple of the key elements. Obviously we had that briefing session recently where we sought to clarify a couple of items. And I think that the two big items that were raised there were accessibility and car parking. With respect to accessibility, we circulated an email late last week, basically explaining that we were, if it was still an issue that was at the council, we were willing to accept a condition on the NOD that required at least 2 of those dwellings to be accessible under the relevant building class. In terms of the actual dwelling itself, or the product that is proposed, we feel as a project team that it is under-provided within the City of Darebin and other parts of Melbourne, being three-storey townhouses for 2 bedrooms. Clearly, Council's LPPF talks about a gap and a reduction in dwelling sizes across the municipality, and a reduction in dwelling number of people residing in dwellings. And recent ABS data would support that too. We feel that there is a gap in high quality townhouses of this nature, hence why we're putting this forward, and we truly do believe in it, and Ben will probably speak to that a little bit more. With respect to car parking, I'll quickly touch on that. We've had an independent traffic engineer look at that. Council's traffic engineer has also looked at that. They both conclude that the dispensation of the visitor requirement is entirely acceptable given the unique surrounds of the site and the adequacy of car parking on the street. I think there was a count, and I think there was 195 spaces available within immediate context of the site. Adding to that, public transport services and bicycle facilities that we're putting in for visitors, we feel on balance that is more than reasonable. Just going to another point that I think the planners just raised in with respect to the height of the development. Within the planning report, there are a number of examples where this type of development has been approved and developed in recent times. So this isn't setting a new precedent for incremental change areas. General residential zone area, Schedule Y2, hasn't got tight site coverage provisions or private open space provisions like another general residential zone schedule, and the incremental change area does talk about this type of development occurring, and even apartments. So from a planning perspective, as I said, we're very proud of the application that's in front of Council tonight, and we look forward, hopefully, to a favourable decision. Can I add anything, Ben, tomorrow? I think that's it. If you've got any questions, one more thing I'll add is just the materials that have been selected are very high quality, robust materials that will stand the test of time. There was mention of blue board and whatnot, definitely not in this development. So I'm harping on a bit, but we're very happy with where it sits. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one objector registered to speak, Graham Love, but it doesn't look like he is with us. So, Councillor, we'll move on to questions. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor McCarthy.
It's just actually, just to clarify through our officers in relation to the zoning of GRZ2, in the immediate proximity, I was just looking through the report just to see whether we do have an example of 3-storey in that immediate vicinity or in that general sort of topography, I suppose, is probably the other thing I'm thinking about.
No, it's not until you get to Murray Road, Councillor. Madam Mayor, there's, in the general areas the report described, it is predominantly a 1 to 2 storey scale. But further afield, you've got sites like the Preston Mosque nearby, buildings on Melbourne Polytechnic that also punctuate the area a little higher than the typical dwelling. But certainly, the officer's report highlights that there is a predominant character of 1 and 2 storey single dwellings.
Thank you. Thanks. Any further questions? So I'd like to move a motion.
I'm happy to move the motion, the recommendation.
The recommendation?
Yep.
Within the report? Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Amir, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure. This is in an area that is definitely changing. I understand that it is a little bit unusual to have a three-storey building in this particular zone, but it is near the residential growth zone, it is near trains, trams, Preston Market. We're going to be seeing a lot of development in this Preston Central Precinct, which is quite nearby. I do acknowledge some of the concerns of other councillors around the design, and certainly for myself, I have a 7-month-old baby. I would not want to live in a house like this with 2 flights of stairs, but perhaps 5 years ago, living in a share house, if you had 2 professionals living together, either a couple or in a share house situation, this would be a really great place to live. The contemporary design near the park is very nice, and the location being on a corner with the roads to the south and the west means that we don't have to worry about some of the overshadowing and overlooking concerns that we have for other sites. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I usually would look quite critically on a 3-storey proposal, even in zoning context, but I think it's actually the context which makes sense for me in relation to this application. Looking at where it is located, thinking about what is expected to take place in that particular pocket, and the need for a range of housing options, particularly with Melbourne Polytechnic, and of course also down the track with redevelopment around Preston more generally. So I'm willing to look at this more seriously, and I think that based on the officer's outline, it does meet all the relevant requirements. I don't see enough reasons to say no at this stage.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Yes, I'm going to speak against the granting of a planning permit on this property. I believe that the proposal does fail to satisfy the objectives of 2204 around neighbourhood character. I don't think there is anything similar right in this location, and I think that will stand out. I've also previously expressed my concern about accessibility of these dwellings and the fact that they're effectively a reverse living situation where any guest, any person entering the property has to go up a flight of stairs to actually get to the living area. That might be acceptable if we were looking at 3 or 4 townhouses. This is 16 townhouses. So to present 16 townhouses, all of which lack that basic level of access to the living space, notwithstanding the willingness, and I thank the applicants for their willingness to look at better accessibility for 2 dwellings, and I would ask, should this go ahead, that provision be put into the conditions. But I don't believe that this is satisfactory in terms of 16 units. That's a change in a very residential area from 2 dwellings on these 2 blocks to 16. It's a huge upscaling. You know, typically when we have one block, we're talking about 4 or 5 dwellings. This is effectively putting 8 dwellings on one block. I think that accessibility is problematic. The waiver of car parking on this location, on this corner location, where it's already more difficult to park because you are looking at the corner setting, is problematic, and the building height will present an unreasonable level of visual bulk to the street. I also believe there's inadequate opportunities for landscaping on the block, noting that most of the space that's not built on is actually the driveway, and that doesn't provide the landscaping opportunities. So on a bright side, I do acknowledge there are some quality building materials, but I don't think that's enough to get this over the line. I think we can do better.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And against? The motion's lost.
Can I put an alternate motion, which would be a motion to refuse the planning permit?
Yep. Would you like to read out the motion?
Sure. The Council refused the application with grounds as follows. The proposal fails to satisfy the objectives of Clause 2204 neighbourhood character of the Darebin Planning Scheme and the design outcome of the Darebin Neighbourhood Character Study and Precinct Guidelines 2007 in terms of height and building form, siting and lack of landscaping. 2. The proposal does not satisfactorily comply with the standards and objectives of Clause 55 of the Darebin Planning Scheme, in particular, A. Clause 55021, neighbourhood character. The proposal is inadequate in terms of the height and building form, siting and lack of landscaping. B, Clause 55022, residential policy. The proposal is contrary to the preferred character of the area, being above the prevailing single-storey scale of the area. C, Clause 55032, building height. The height of the development will result in an unreasonable level of visual bulk to the street and adjoining properties and is above the prevailing single-storey scale of the area. D, Clause 55038, landscaping. Insufficient opportunities within side and rear setbacks to provide landscaping. E, Clause 55061, design detail. The design of the development will result in an unreasonable level of visual bulk to the street and neighbouring properties. Point 3, no visitor car parking is provided contrary to Clause 5206, car parking of the Darebin Planning Scheme. And 4, inadequate provision for accessible living.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Is there a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, I've already said a few words. I think that, there's a lot in that motion and it speaks to itself, so I won't add anything further. Thank
you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor Williams?
Nothing further to add.
Would anyone else wish to speak? No, if not, I'll put that straight to the vote. All those in favour and against? That motion is carried. So the Planning Committee has decided to refuse the planning permit. The applicant has 60 days to appeal this decision to VCAT. Notices detailing tonight's decision and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant over the next week. Moving on now to item 6, other business. 6.1, general planning information, scheduled VCAT applications, significant applications and applications for the next Planning Committee meeting. Moved by Councillor McCarthy, seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? It's carried. Item 7, urgent business. Is there any urgent business?
Not notified.
Thank you. And close of meeting. Thank you, everybody. 7:03.
Sit down for a few minutes. Hey?